Hello and welcome to the Comparesoft ERP Podcast. Today we're focusing on public sector ERP and how aging technology, rising cost and security concerns are forcing legacy to cloud digital transformations in councils and public bodies. I'm joined by Ramzan Amin, founder and CEO of Sim Consulting. Ramzan is a digital transformation leader and is the current ERP Programme Director at Kent County Council. In this episode, we're getting into the realities of public sector ERP transformation. Why these programs lose control early, why transformation is rarely just a technology upgrade, and what leaders need to get right to make legacy to cloud ERP actually stick. Ramzan, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for welcoming me. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome stuff. So today, Ramzan, we're focusing on public sector ERP, and as an ERP Programme Director at Kent County Council, I'm hoping you can provide us with that detailed insight on this topic.
Yes, definitely. Look forward to it.
So a lot of public sector teams are under pressure due to their aging ERP platforms. You know, they're costly to run, they're hard to secure. For a lot of councils, the move from legacy ERP to cloud is less about chasing new features, more about restoring control and confidence in those numbers. So just to start us off, from your experience, what are the core reasons organizations change their operating model from legacy to cloud? Like what problems are they really trying to solve there?
I think on the surface, organizations think they're replacing a legacy system because it's old, out of date, it's bespoke, are some of the main reasons, or in some cases just become unsupported. So in effect, they can't actually take anything new in terms of functionality or features which may make their business more efficient. So they end up stuck on a very old legacy system. And what tends to happen is they then say, well, how can we work around this inefficiency? And they create shadow systems and more systems and et cetera, et cetera. So the landscape becomes more complicated. But what they're trying to resolve actually is something called constraint. So they have some constraints that they're trying to get around. And that's the main reason, even though they might not know it, is the reason why they're doing it. So what they're looking for is they're looking for some clarity, control, and agility. So with the advent of moving across to something a bit more modern, which has modern features, that gives them what they want. And that's the primary reason, even though that's not how they understand it at the beginning. So they want to be able to get clearer data, faster decisions, better embedded controls, very limited manual effort where possible, and then the ability to change processes without having to do multi-year implementations on a frequent basis.
How often does it take them to realize that that's what they need?
I think probably partway through a program in an implementation where they're busy understanding what they're going to get, they realize actually I could do this, I could do that, this is going to make my life so much easier. I'm going to have AI, which is going to enable me to process invoices automatically. I don't need to have 4 people doing that anymore. I can redeploy those people somewhere else. So that's how they start to realize the value of moving to a more modern platform. Because don't forget, if they've been on a solution for anything between 10 to 20 years, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what good looks like anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you touched on new features AI there. You know, how often do they see it framed as more technology upgrades, all about technology, when in reality it's more about the people, processes and the ways of working?
Oh, it's definitely the people and processes. I think most large scale digital transformations often start out badged as IT. But in reality, modern technology is more business orientated. It's about how can the business become more efficient. So it's not about automation per se. It's about how can we make better choices? How can we change cultural habits in the organization? So if the processes are slick, streamlined, they can make decisions faster, they get better, informative business intelligence, their business decision making will in fact follow that. As a business, they can see where their problems lie a lot quicker. Where do they need to make decisions a lot quicker? Oh, where do they need to drop? And say, well, okay, this is no longer an effective a process or no longer an effective business stream, let's refocus. And that's what having modern technology like AI or modern features in the system allows a business to do.
So, and now if we focus now on your your responsibilities, your processes. So once an organization is committed to transformation, they've selected their ERP system. That's typically where you come in, right? So when you step into a program post selection, what is the first thing you assess to really understand whether transformation is recoverable or truly scalable?
So I think sometimes I've come in before that decision has been made as well. So it can be a combination of both. I've been in situations where a business has required, or even a public sector client has required assistance in defining a business case. So why do we want to do an ERP transformation? Why do we need it? Other than, of course, the system, which is the easy answer. But what's the real reason behind it? So helping them with a business scenario, helping them find the right options is also critical. So doing things like soft market testing to say what's available out there in the marketplace, which best suits us as an organization that will best fit our needs. But on the other hand, you have where they've already made a decision. And then the first thing I assess isn't the technology, because you must have selected the technology for a reason. And I would do a check to say, was it the right choice? Generally too late anyway. But
Mm.
anyway, it's good to know that they've made the right choice. But it's a decision making clarity. So are you as an organization, do you understand the business transformation side, not the technology? The technology is nothing but an enabler for you. So who actually will own the outcomes? Do you know that? Who has the authority to make the hard trade-offs? Are you prepared to do that? Because that's what it will take. And how quickly can decisions be made and enforced? Because if you don't have any of those, you can have the most shiny, amazing, brilliant technology in the world. It doesn't matter. There's still the human element that comes into it. Yeah. But if the decisions become blurred or consensus driven to the point of paralysis, any program will struggle. And no AI or agents is ever going to resolve that.
And do you find it easier sort of going into an organization pre-system selection or post-system selection? What's easier for your side? Like, has
I
there
would,
been a point where you've come in, they've chosen a system, and you think, actually, no, this is the wrong system for you?
yes, I have been in that scenario, but you can't unpick a decision which has probably incurred a lot of money and time. So you have to couch your advice carefully and just try and make the best out of what they have done. Ideally, it's better if you can go in pre-selection, because you can help them influence what is the right tool. So you shouldn't base any tool on for the product or the tool's sake. You need to base it on, well, what's your need? What outcomes are you expecting? How will it improve your business? So there's a whole set of criteria that should be going behind it. And I think generally that's what most people do. Um, but there is always an element of, how do I put this? Favorites, if I could call it that. Some people might have favorites because they might have used it somewhere else, and they say, "Yeah, well, it worked fine there for me, so why don't we just do that?" Whereas a proper open market tender process will give you the right answer if you ask the right questions.
Would you say there's been pushback when you've come in? You say, well, this system isn't right for you. Would you say you've got a lot of pushback on that at all, or any agreements to it?
Um, well, it
I'm not saying name
depends.
names, but
You do get pushback. So for example, without naming any particular client, they procured Microsoft's offering in the ERP space, a really large global organization across 4 continents, from memory. Um, I didn't feel it was the right solution given the size and scale. Perhaps something more like SAP or Oracle would have been more suited because it was more scalable. Not that Microsoft isn't a huge organization. It is, but it was fairly new in that space. So it wasn't as mature as the other two providers. Thankfully, I wasn't the only one who thought that. Um, the new CTO, global CTO, had the same thought. He expressed it, let's say, a little bit more openly than I did.
And what was the outcome there?
Oh well, the money they'd already incurred spend. They were already partway through the program. It didn't
Yeah, they
make
were
any
committed
sense
to
to
it.
stop it. They're committed to it. Once you commit to something, you have to complete it. You can't start rolling back, and that just in itself creates an awful lot of other consequences other than money, which a lot of it already been spent. So you have what you have. Just finish it, get it done.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And ultimately, the Microsoft product was going to develop over time. It would catch up. You just have to go along the journey.
Yeah, and obviously that could lead, the wrong system implementation. It leads to a lot of failures. There's a
Yes.
big debate around implementation failure rates. Some research suggests between 70 to 90% fail. Others argue it's much lower. How would you personally define ERP failure, or to put it in another way, what does a successful digital transformation look like to you?
I think it depends on what the failure was. Some people couch it as it ran late or it cost more than planned. Yes, they're critical, especially for public sector organizations where there's a lot of scrutiny, especially around how much you're spending, what you're spending it on, but they're not the real test. I think a transformation ultimately fails if the organization reverts to the bad old ways. It's bought a nice new system, but people culturally, behaviorally haven't changed. That's where the real challenge is. It's not the technology, it's the people. If you can't take them on the journey and explain to them what it means and how it affects them, well, they're just not going to come along. And what tends to happen is they just rebuild the old world. And you will have spent an awful lot of time and money implementing something that would have had a significant effect on the business, and they don't wish to change. That goes back to governance, goes back to what outcomes are you looking for, it goes back to who's willing to make the hard decisions. Ultimately, that has to come from within. You can have all the best consultants in the world, but they don't really have the authority to say, well, this is the way it's going to be.
Would you
Sorry, go
would you
on.
say in that change management, that training, that's one of the earliest warning signs that, okay, this
Yes.
is about to lose control?
Yeah, and these things don't happen overnight. They happen gradually, and you have to spot the signs that they're happening. And they are fairly quite straightforward to notice. You'll always have what I call a resistance scale. You'll have the friendly users who are desperate to get their hands on it. You'll have those in the middle who are slightly skeptical because they're not sure. They don't know what they don't know, but they can be won over. And you'll always have those on the right hand side of the scale. It doesn't matter what you say, what you do, what you show, they're just not going to go for it.
Stubbornness, I call that, Ramzan.
Stubbornness. Yes, that's the right word, stubbornness.
What's your course of action when you see those early signs?
I think the first course of action is to explain to them, try to bring them along, explain this an opportunity, it's not a threat. They can benefit from this, and this is how they could benefit. And you have to keep going through that process and you keep showing them. Ultimately, if somebody doesn't, as I say, you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. And if they don't want to drink, well, you just say to the relevant senior stakeholders in the organization, this is the scenario. I don't see them changing. It's often better just to remove them because it could infect other parts of the implementation for those people who do want to move forward, who do want to see the change. So you don't want to contaminate everybody else with people who just want to become disruptive. I know it sounds a bit harsh, but that's just the reality of it. You have to make a choice. And that's what I meant by you have to make the hard decisions. You have to make the hard choices. And sometimes that's where it goes. And you have to be prepared to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's for the better, it's for the
For
return
the
on investment
betterment
at
of
the
the
end of the
whole
day, isn't it?
organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And now you're currently the ERP Programme Director at Kent County Council. So you joined there after I think it was the RFP stage. Could you just walk us through that transformation journey since starting in 2021, what you've been responsible for and where you're at in the program today?
So I joined the organization. Actually, that was probably my mistake. I joined it at the business case stage. So I helped them develop the business case. We went through a process of capturing the key criteria for product selection. We did a soft market assessment and said, well, what's out there against our criteria? We did a scoring process, discussed the pros and cons. We ended up with two options. We had a hybrid option and what I call a full end-to-end option. After further refinement, it became clear that there was only one real winner because of a specific requirement called multiple assignments. So in councils, people can do more than one thing, and only one product actually had that feature ready. The others didn't. So
Out of how many products is that?
So we looked at, I think, at least four, possibly five. One had it ready to go. Yeah.
Did that kind of force your hand to that product, or
Not
was it still like it was
necessarily.
still on the short list?
Not necessarily, because we'd already filtered down to two options: the hybrid and the single. So we'd already removed three out of the process because, for various reasons, not fit for HR or not fit for finance. So they were then excluded, leaving us with two hybrid options. Hybrid in itself can create more complexity in implementations. Then got multiple vendors involved in the implementation, and then you've got to have more integration in. So things like cost of ownership at the end would have been a lot higher. Do you really want to do that as an organization, especially with public sector? Do they want to have that kind of ownership, multiple teams? But I guess the criteria that flipped the decision was this multiple assignments. That kind of took away the council having to sit there and think, well, what's the right way forward?
Yeah.
But I'm fairly sure they would have selected the single anyway, because I think they felt that a hybrid would be too costly overall.
And where are you in that program today?
So where we are today, so we've successfully implemented a major part of the implementation, and we're almost 75% of the way through the second phase.
Amazing. And when would that be completed by, do you hope?
In the next few months.
Excellent. On track.
On track.
And how different is it leading that ERP transformation in local government compared to sectors like health or telecoms?
I think local government transformation is only different. Well, if you take private sector, let's call it like that, telecoms or health or any other organization, they have often a much clearer commercial driver and a higher tolerance for rapid change. Whereas from a governmental or local authority perspective, you have to balance things. It's not just about the commercial drivers. You've got transformation, you've got statutory duties, you've got public accountability, political governance also gets involved, and you've got intense financial scrutiny. So it's a very different set of challenges compared to a private sector. So decision making can be a bit more distributed, which makes change cycles a little bit longer. As for somebody who came out from the private sector into the local authority sector, it was a bit of an eye opener at the beginning. I'm a lot more accustomed to it now, but I can understand why they have to do what they have to do, because consequences of failure become public. And as you know, anything that becomes public then has its own cycle of attention, which is hard to undo very quickly. So you have to go through those checks and balances, provide more evidence, a more deliberate engagement to make sure you're making the right decision. Yeah, it is a lot more difficult, but I can understand the reasons why they have to go through the process they go through.
Sure. And you touched it there, they have to be public, and
Yes.
one local authority is featured heavily in conversations recently is Birmingham City Council. So I think the most recent report put the cost of that ERP project at £144 million. I think a delay of 5 years as well. From what you've seen from that, where do you think things started to go wrong there in that implementation, and what lessons should other organisations take from it in terms of pitfalls to avoid?
I think Yes, the example you quoted is obviously in the public domain, and you'll find lots of local authorities now refer to it as what not to do. But as a soundbite, that's great. But what actually what lessons do you need to take away from it is the key thing. And I
Mm.
think the key lessons take from that implementation were, I think, ownership of from a stakeholder perspective, probably governance, which I mentioned at the outset from the beginning. Was there sufficient governance? Was there sufficient ownership? Were the outcomes clear? Who was making the hard decisions? Anyone? And I think the other challenge is where people try to replicate their existing world into a new, completely different product because that's the way they've always worked.
Mm.
And if you take all of those things together, individually, any one of them could have led to what happened, but collectively, it was a significant impact. So I would say those were the key factors that led to that outcome.
An accumulation of
An
all that.
accumulation of things, as opposed to one single thing.
Okay. And it, I mean, it seems like they're just taking that sort of failure, that I like the term garbage in, garbage out, the data,
Yes,
they're taking
yes,
it to another system, they're repeating everything, they're copy
yes,
and pasting it, where that's,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you never take an old legacy system, regardless of what it's called. Let's just call it A, for example, and you've got a brand new system called B, which is a different product vendor, a different way of working. And if you're trying to copy that into there, well, that's an automatic red flag. That's going to
Mm.
fail anyway. That's not what you should be doing. What you should be doing is saying, I understand what you have, but this works like this. This is out of the box. This is standard. That's what you need to adopt. And that in itself, if that had been enforced in a much harder way, that comes back to the making hard decisions, then that would have perhaps removed a large percentage of risk
Mm.
of that implementation. But then that comes back to ownership. Who was owning those decisions? Who was owning the outcomes,
Yeah,
etc.
who should be enforcing that really at that stage?
Ultimately, it should be what they refer to as a senior responsible officer, who's responsible for the entire transformation program from an organizational point of view. It's their role to make sure that's what's happening. It's their role to make sure nobody's saying, "Well, I just want to copy my old system into the new system," or "I'm not willing to change the way I work." Then that's where senior stakeholders need to step in and say, well, no, that's not why we are doing this. We are doing this because we want to become more efficient. We want to take advantage of these new features and we want to streamline our processes. So that's the way it's going to be.
If you were to just step in there, is it a case of saying, like, stripping everything back? Right, we're starting again. Is it that daunting of a task now looking at
Well, obviously, I'm not there, so I can't comment.
it? Yeah. I would
But
like to see you in that room, Ramzan.
if it was me, I would probably say you just need to start from scratch rather than trying to unpick what's been done, because it's often more difficult to unpick than just simply to say scrap it and these are the new rules, the new principles that we're going to operate on, and make sure all of the things that I mentioned, governance, ownership, decision making, is all in place with clear owners. As somebody once said to me early on in life, as I started my journey, have one throat to choke and they're responsible, because if it
Excellent.
goes wrong, it's on them. Not
Excellent.
in a negative or in a bad way, but if there's no
Yeah.
ownership, what happens is decisions just drift. And when things drift, people make their own decisions, often not the right ones, because for the lack of any ownership, somebody has to do something.
Yeah. You get to the point where there's too many chefs in the kitchen,
Too many chefs, not enough cooks. There needs to be limited chefs and who need to be directed about what the menu is, for the next 2 years.
Amazing analogy. Very good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Ramzan, we like to save these last few questions just for sharing your insight, giving some advice for listeners as well. So there's a lot of noise around AI integration, particularly using it in ERP implementations. Something you've built at Sim is your AI automation tool. I think it's called Testify. What is it designed to achieve, and what can tools like this generally do to reduce the risk of ERP transformation?
I think AI, yeah, there's a lot of noise around AI. It's a new buzzword. Everybody's hanging on to it. Say it's going to do everything for me, from even making my cup of tea. That joking apart, I think the biggest risk is assuming AI replaces discipline. It doesn't. Testify was designed to do the opposite. Its purpose is to remove human error, fatigue from the parts of ERP implementations that are repetitive, high volume, time critical, particularly testing and validation. So what Testify does, it can manually test everything that you do manually automatically, but it also allows you to do things like AI prompt. So let's say let's say I'm working finance, and I can see there's a new feature coming in from a new release that the product is releasing. I don't have to sit there and work out, well, how do I write this with these technical languages and that they used to have to do. It's just an AI prompt now. You just say, design for me a scenario that tests X, Y, Z. It'll go away and write it for you. And then if you're happy with what it's come back with, you can then say, well, can you execute it for me? It will execute that scenario for you. And then so it compresses your timelines and not have blind spots. And the other benefits, of course, you can run it as many times as you want. You can run it overnight, lunchtime, come back, you can have your lunch. So it captures key ERP scenarios like procure to pay, payroll cycles, financial postings, things that you don't have to worry about. And you can focus on improving the business operations and then let that run in the background. So it's repeatability, transparency. So you can rerun these things over and over again. Yeah, if you use AI properly, it can make your programs faster by not by cutting corners, but by making them safer, by enforcing rigor. And it doesn't remove the human element because ultimately humans are still involved in the decision-making process. And
Mm.
you can't remove that until
So
we get, sorry, go on.
as an AI tool, it's not only reducing time, it's also sort of reducing that skills gap as well, isn't it? For the
Yes,
use of these prompts.
yes, skills gaps. And you don't need a huge army of people to do that because it's low or no code. Slow or no code. It's more business friendly. So I, as a business user, don't have to worry about, well, how am I going to enable to run these scenarios? Do I have to
Yeah.
write code? Do I have to understand how to write test scripts? No, none of that is needed.
We're
So it's
talking
just,
about taking 3-4 days down to a couple of hours,
yes,
Yeah.
basically, yes. Yeah. Optimization. So some of the strongest cases are things like data profiling and cleansing, which is often big parts of implementation. So identifying duplicates, anomalies, obviously testing and regression, which I mentioned, and reporting assurance. So Testify, seamlessly integrates with many tools like Jira, etc. So you've got good reporting capabilities as well, telling you the results.
Yeah, really cool. And you've got clients using that now?
Yes. Yeah.
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 Amazing.
So we hope to keep progressing and building on making it more efficient, making it better as we go along.
If you could look back across the transformations you've seen succeed and struggle, what is the one control point that really decides whether a legacy ERP replacement actually sticks long term?
I think the one control point I would probably look at is business ownership after go live. So have they invested heavily enough to take it over? Because what you don't want to do is to have your system integrator or internal independent consultants hanging around for a long period, which basically means you as a business haven't taken ownership. You're still reliant upon third parties to help you do that. So transformations are still the ones where ownership decisively moves away from the program to the business, and they've taken over the accountability on how to run it. and they know the processes and they know how to maintain those processes. They've got the organization that will support it, like a center of excellence, and they know how to maintain it, and they know how to run it, and they know how to adopt the best ways and best practice from the product. So it's business, I would say it's business ownership. If they've taken ownership, they've achieved their goal.
It's a higher rate of success through business ownership.
Much higher rate of success, yes. Much higher rate of success. But the journey doesn't end at implementation. The journey continues. Can take between 6 to 12 months for such a big change to embed properly. So I think that's the other key message from large-scale ERP implementations is the change doesn't end the day you switched over. The change journey continues, and you need to keep that in your mind, because every quarter you'll be getting new things coming in through the door. So your change process continues. You just need to keep adopting and adapting the way you work.
I feel like that could be another podcast episode in itself, Ramzan.
Sounds good to me.
Well,
sounds good to me.
Thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your experience.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you've given such a real practical view of what matters most in public sector ERP programs,
Yes.
And that legacy to cloud transformation. So, thanks so much again, Ramzan.
No, thank you, and I appreciate being invited. Look forward to maybe perhaps another one.
Yes, definitely. And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you. Have a great day and a weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.